Right, we'll make a start. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks again for joining us. The next in our series. Good to see you all, a lot of familiar faces and names. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, very well welcome to you. Great to have you here. And just by way of usual formalities, we do have a code of conduct. So do please familiarise yourself with that. In short, we ask that you be respectful to one another. We want everyone to have a harassment-free experience. If you do want to go in and read our code of conduct, it is available in Meetup, so do please do so. We'll do the usual community shout-outs at the end and a few other bits and pieces. And just have a great evening. And delighted to have Marcus joining us this evening. Just going to hand over to him shortly. Marcus has a amazing career history. It's really quite impressive. And having been a senior military officer, he's had years in the RAF and toured all over the world. I'm sure he's got a story or two. And he's since moved into sort of providing consultancy in sort of the corporate world and helping organisations get the best out of red team thinking, which is why we're all here this evening. I am enjoying the book. I'm not very far through it, to be honest, so I'm looking for Marcus to plug some of the gaps in my understanding this evening, and I'm sure he will do just that. Marcus, welcome. Great to have you.
Thank you very much. All right, I can't host as disabled attendee screen sharing. Can you make me a co-host and I can share my deck?
Doing so right now. That should be you.
There we go. We can do this. There we go. Great. Well, good evening, everybody. And thank you for so much of you coming along and attending, and especially from those around the globe. It's an honor to have people show up at those times, so appreciate that. I just want to start by sort of introduction with understanding the scale of the challenge. And you can see here a comment from General Stanley McChrystal, who was the Special Forces commander during Iraq and then in Afghanistan, who wrote the book Team of Teams, which some of you may be familiar with. And he says here, while you may not be facing an enemy fanatically committed to your death, you are leading during one of the most significant transitional eras in the history of mankind, and the speed of change is not going to slow down anytime soon. I'm sure some of us may have managers who we feel are committed to our deaths in the past, but clearly ISIS, facing ISIS versus facing individuals at work is somewhat different. But the intent here is to say the speed of which things are changing around us, and this is pre-COVID, it's been astronomically fast. And as we move through the different quotes, I'm just going to open with here. You see here now the rate of change that we are going through at the moment is comparable to what happens in wartime. Yet we think we are at peace. Now, the global pace of change is overcoming the capacity of national and international institutions. So the pace of this is actually going faster than we're even capable of dealing with at the national and international scale. Now, to throw off there, that wasn't a wartime quote from Churchill. It was just there to be topical and challenge you. This was actually 2018. So the recognition now that this last decade has really seen this shift in what's going on has been astronomical. And then again, also that same year, this is Ian Conn, the CEO of Centrica. It's moving too fast. It's revolution, not evolution. There are many accelerations at once, and one of the biggest problems is the difficulty of mankind to cope with it. I don't know whether political leaders or business leaders can easily handle it. So this is now a recognition of the fact that what we are now facing today, this new way of working that's hit us in this new century of digital evolution, is no longer the capabilities of a single super CEO. Those heroes of the 90s and the noughties even, who brought these companies up on their own and carried it all on their shoulders, they can't deal with this anymore because it's just too complex. And for those aware of the Kneffing understanding, we've moved from that complicated quadrant into complex adaptive systems. And it's interesting that Ian Conn is stepping down as the CEO this summer, having lost about 15 billion of their profits in the last 2 years. Such is the complexity. And this is one of the statements he made at the beginning, saying, this is really hard. But how many of these big organizations listen? How many get to that breaking point before they take action? And how many individuals fail because of it? And all this comes down to what we call VUCA, which is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Now, you may have heard this bandied around. I've been briefing this for the last 5 years. A lot of it's fallen on deaf ears when I brief this to executives, They're like, yeah, this is no different. It was tough back in the 80s and 90s. What's different nowadays? What's changed? You know, these are now the new norms, whether it's business, political, and personal. Are you ready to deal with it? And the famous quote that came from was from me today. But I've obviously been saying this for a long time, because this is something that is really catching people out. Now, just to prove I'm not making all this stuff up, the Business Agility Report from the Business Agility Institute for the last 2 years releases a fantastic report that canvasses countries and companies around the globe to find out how it's going. What's going on with your transformations, your change management programs to deal with this new world that we're facing into. And these are the top 10 themes that came up as the problems. And the number one has been leadership style, the change management ways of doing it, and the culture, top 3. Noticeably last year, number 1 was leadership again. So what we're now starting to see is that there's a thread, and I'll bet a week's wage that the next one that comes out next year will be leadership again. This isn't the tools, this isn't the processes and the frameworks we're using, it's the inability of leadership to adapt and evolve themselves. And I did a blog on LinkedIn yesterday about the agile C-suite. No such thing that I've known of. How that C-suite needs to evolve is at the same pace as those at the coalface expecting to be doing the work. If it doesn't, then you get not a 2-speed organization, you get a multi-speed organization, which becomes more confusing and incompetent than the old ways of working, delivering fixed programs to an end date. What's even more worrying, when you start to look at the data, and believe me, if you've not got this report, download it. It's free, really detailed, very revealing. Look at the data and I'll blow it up for you. 2019 versus 2018. Financial services and insurance, which is my sweet spot. And I know a lot of people, I've worked in banking industry for the last 5 years in some of the big banks. They're going backwards. They've gone down from 4.3 to 3.7. So all these new ways of working that are coming out there, and everybody's going agile frenzy and talking all these great buzzwords, it's actually getting worse. That's a fact. I know that, I've sensed that, I've seen it, I've witnessed it. A lot of people here today have, but now this is proven. And despite the veneer of how awesome this all is and how great everything's going, it's actually the opposite. Things are not progressing. Now, add to all that what we've just faced in the last 3 months with COVID, it's going to make things even worse. So one might say that agile isn't working, if we even know what agile is. But it's quite clear to understand what that means. It's almost become so ubiquitous that it's become meaningless. It's everywhere and everything to everybody, but nobody really understands what the true meaning of it is and what is it intended to do. And obviously when you've been in these programs, we understand that change is real. A friend of mine commented today about these roles she'd seen. She'd applied for a director of change role, and she went along, met with the individuals who were interviewing her. And at the end of it, she said, "You don't want a director of change, do you?" "What do you mean?" She goes, "You want a director of more of the same." "What do you mean?" She said, "No, you say you want to change, but every question I've asked you shows to me it's just veneer. You don't really want that. You just want to be perceived to be changing, but you're not going through the actual reality of doing that." Because everybody wants to change. We all know this. We all put our hands up and volunteer to do that change. All right, but who actually wants to change? Of course we want change, but I have to do something different myself? Doesn't sound too good anymore. And then the hard part, who actually wants to lead the change? And when you think about the way our organizations are managed and run by a certain age, certain gender, certain mindset executive board that are still laggards of the old era, how can they be expected to move into these new ways of thinking and these new ways of working? It's difficult, and it's not their fault. They've learned a lot of set of behaviors that have got them to that position, and therefore to do something different, they need to unlearn a lot of those behaviors themselves. And there's a great book by Barry O'Reilly who talks about having to unlearn these processes before you can relearn new things. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, you can, but they have to forget the old tricks first and understand why. Because what happens is, and there's loads of sort of psychological stress tests that you can do here, that the minute you start to become pressured or in a situation you're familiar with, you tend to revert back to your old type, your old ways of working. And obviously doing these large scale transformations, the pressure comes on pretty quick, I think, as we all know. So straight away, while you're well intended, and I met some phenomenal CEOs and executives who really want to do this, and then the first quarter, something will go wrong, the figures don't hit what they expect, and they revert back to type. They pull on the reins, it becomes more restrictive, the risk levels go up, therefore their conscience starts to get a grip of them, and they become far more old school in their ways of managing the teams. So this is an actual real quote from Winston Churchill. Again, I like to keep it topical, so we've got Churchill up there. But what he's talking about here, and even more topical, you know, I'll bring it up to date. What we're looking at now is want of foresight and the unwillingness to act. Lack of clear thinking, confusion, endless repetition. You know, do those words ring true to most people here today? You know, have we all seen those behaviors? Have we seen those lessons learned? In the military, we used to call them lessons learned. And then somebody went, excuse me, yeah, we're not learning these lessons. We're making the same mistakes despite having a lessons learned, you know, database. So we turn them to lessons identified. So we've identified them, we just do nothing about it. And then it became a joke of lessons identified, LIs became lessons ignored because we know them, but we just completely forget about them. And this is a 1940s quote. So this is just showing the repetition over decades of the same behaviors. And it's why do we have these behaviors? And it ultimately boils down to, it's not the fact that the new ways of working aren't good and aren't effective. We're not thinking differently. People are still behaving and thinking in the way they've always thought, the way they were always taught. And this is often from childhood, from schooling, and certainly through your earlier career, that you get taught to think and behave in a certain way. And that's almost beaten out of you as a child as you go through schools. That inquisitive, that curious, that mini scientist that we all have as a child almost gets taken away from you. You get told to put in a box and think in a certain way. And therefore to challenge and be contrarian as you get higher up in the workplace is often seen as like a dirty word. How dare you challenge us? This is how it's going to be. So it's how do you now shift those new ways of working aligned to a new way of thinking that lets those new ways work? Because if you don't, new ways of working with old ways of thinking don't work. And I would say, hopefully, I've evidence so far that that's what's going on today, given what we've seen over the last 5 years at least. So hopefully, I'm going to talk about today red team thinking, which allows you ultimately to make better decisions faster. And again, when I talk to CEOs, I go, oh, if we just do this, Marcus, it's going to slow me down. It's a couple of days out of the time I don't need. I already make decisions fast. I said, yes, but we know how good your decisions are that you make super fast, don't you? And he's like, yeah, okay. Would it be worth taking out a day to make a 50 times better decision and get what you need versus going off piece 3 months downrange and it all falling apart? And when you have those conversations and reality backed up with data, they start to listen, which is where we're trying to get to today, to evolve this leadership problem at the top to bring it down to where it needs to be. And as Sath said, thank you. My name's Marcus Dimbleby. That's the introduction to hopefully wet your juices and get you interested in this. I'm a partner at Red Team Thinking, which is a US-based company, but we're now global. My history, 20 plus years in the Royal Air Force. My sort of closing moment was red teaming for the Olympics. I was the air defense commander for the Olympic ceremony. So how do you red team that event? You know, yes, an airliner flying into the stadium is going to be catastrophic, but what are all the other threats? Paragliders, microlights, drones, all of those things that we had to really understand and build a defense capability in to incorporate that. Since then, I left, went into industry, and I've been doing sort of large scale transformations, head of Agile at Lloyds Bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, HSBC, some government work as well, and Cabinet Office. And then we started doing the red team thinking late last year, trying to expand it from America and bring it across the Atlantic and down to Australia. And thanks to the lady from Sydney, we've had somebody on our course from Sydney as well, joining at Dark 100. So I appreciate that. So where does all this come from? I'm not making this up. It's not something that we just said, right, we need a new buzzword along with Agile, let's make up red teaming. This has been around for centuries. This chap here, Pope Sixtus V, he's got a bigger nose as me, so I quite like him. Not to be confused with Pope Fifthus VI. This chap was around in 1587. He was the Pope at the time, and what was happening in 1587 was all of these saints were appearing, and they were all applying to the Catholic Church to get sainthood. And obviously with that gets a big wad of cash. So funny old thing, the lines around the Vatican were forming daily, and it was getting quite expensive. So they said, hang on a minute, I'm not sure that you're all worthy of canonization. I'm not sure you're all doing good deeds as saints. I think some of you are just trying to get this for the money. So what they did was they established the Advocatus Diaboli, which is the devil's advocate, which is where the name comes from. So the devil's advocate is there to challenge. So the office was set up, and funny old thing, within a year, there was a 78% reduction in those people not turning down, actually showing up to ask, because they knew that they wouldn't get through this process. So this is the first formal challenge using this terminology and where the word devil's advocate came from. So this is, we're now talking almost 500 years old. Moving forward, 19th century, the Prussian army. They're up against Napoleon. They've been defeated numerous times against Napoleon's smaller, more incompetent French army. And they just didn't know what was going on. They were really struggling. Every time they went out to fight, they were losing. So they established what was called Kriegsspiel, which is German for wargaming. So what they did at the time was they brought in their most proficient, capable individuals. So if they had a corporal who was fantastic at artillery, they'd bring the corporal in. It was no longer the generals deciding how things were done. They'd get their best people from the coalface and bring them to the table and give them a voice and a seat. And by bringing all their best capabilities together, they then enhance that Kriegsspiel thought process to then go out and fight what the enemy was doing. And they actually had this little war table where they did wargaming. We call it a bird table in the military. And they created some little wooden pieces like Ludo men. And they had blue for the Prussian army's uniform, and they painted Napoleon's guys in red because that was the color of their uniform. So this was the first time that we'd actually seen wargaming and the term red teaming coming in. And what they did was they plotted the perspective of what they were thinking was going to happen on the battlefield. And instead of just plotting out their plans, they also plotted the enemy's plans and got their heads into the enemy's thoughts. So having gone into combat numerous times, they could understand how Napoleon was thinking, what was he doing? So if we go this way, what would Napoleon's army do? So they started to think like the enemy. And by doing that, they assessed the threats as they were moving across the battlefield. And again, having all those individuals, the corporals, the sergeants, all levels, inputting their perspectives. And not only could they then see the threats, but they saw the opportunities. They saw where there was a gap. They saw there was a chink in the armor, and they could exploit that and then go to victory. And by going through all that, they could validate the assumptions that they believed and turn them into facts. And also they could, what if we go this way, what if this happens? What if that happens? So what you're doing is you're almost looking ahead, planning out without a crystal ball, what the actions that might happen. And if you understand what your enemy is doing, there's only so many things an enemy can do back to you. So it's clear that by going through this process, they were far more capable, and ultimately they went on to win and destroy Napoleon, but not without its cost at the beginning. Leaping to the 21st century, this picture is familiar to everyone, but what isn't familiar probably is that was the 11th of September. On the 12th of September, the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency in America, formed what's called the Red Cell. And that was to start understanding what is going on with our enemy. This was such an asymmetric attack that nobody, talk about a black swan event. Could we have predicted this happening? Yeah, but possibly. Actually, there was evidence that we could have predicted this was happening. And the CIA, the FBI, nobody was talking. And when you find out that you talk to an airfield where they had, a bunch of individuals arriving for flying lessons, but they didn't want to learn the landing portion, and that was reported, you may have had a red flag raised about inquiring and investigating that, but they didn't, and this tragic event happened and obviously changed the world that we know it. But once a red cell did form from the CIA, numerous militaries across the world quickly followed suit. NATO has now a red cell capability, the UK had one, the New Zealand has one, and different forces and the Israelis especially. And sadly, a couple of these have fallen in the last 2 years. The UK, I got a call from the UK guy the other day asking if I can help them with a doctrine. I said, no, you need to call your cell at Trivenham. He said, I did. They were disbanded 2 years ago. So again, when they're not used all the time, people realize that we're not really paying for much here. We can close it down. But now when something happens, they need them. So having a red team is highly costly. But this is why the red team thinking capability is something we're trying to promote. And obviously businesses are now doing this. And this is what Bryce Hoffman, who we'll cover shortly, instigated, is bringing this capability into business because of the value it can bring into your organization. Jump in with any questions set as we go through. And then from the Department of Defense, they put this statement out. And I've highlighted the key phrase here. So red teams are established by an enterprise to challenge aspects of that very enterprise's plan. This is the whole purpose. You are to challenge your own plan. How often do we get to do that? And it's this aspect of deliberate challenge that makes red teams different from other management tools. Yes, we all talk about hypotheses and this and fishbone that, but who actually comes in with the opposition's hat on, or the naysayer or the cynic, and feels comfortable, has the psychological safety to apply that sort of challenge to an organization? I remember when I was in Lloyd's, I went to a meeting on this about their values, and one of their values was challenge. And there was a chap in the audience who'd been there 26 years, and there was these young couple at the front briefing this from the PR department. And they said, we want you to challenge this, challenge that, and the CEO wants this and that to be coming from the... And this guy went, hey, I challenged once 3 years ago. I lost my bonus, and it's taken me 3 years to get back to where I was in my reporting ever since that day. So while you say you want this as an organization, if you don't have that permeated at all levels, that people do feel safe, you will always have that permafrost level where people will never break through. Having red teaming as a capability in your organization that's vetoed and supported by the top means that you have that ability to have a voice with the psychological safety that brings with it. And we'll talk more of that as we go forward. So why do we need this in business? As you can see here, and again, going back to pre-COVID, this was hard. Now it's practically impossible for a lot of businesses. How many are going to be out of business by the end of the year? Only knows. There's talk of 20,000 shops on the high street. I was in London in Canary Wharf on level 39 in March with a crew from there. And we're overlooking the whole of London, Canary Wharf business area. And we just said, how many of these businesses will be gone by Christmas? Percentage. And the figures range from 15 to 60%. Who knows? But, we don't know yet what's going to happen. So why do they fail? There's no market need, or there is a market need, but that quickly disappears overnight because you weren't planning. Digital cameras versus wet film. There's stories galore of how these things evolve but quickly become meaningless. They try to grow too soon. I did Startup Week, Newcastle Startup Week a couple of weeks ago, and day 4 was growing and scaling and helping startups understand that if you grow too soon, even if you're super successful, that's equally as dangerous as some of the things that will make you fail. Poor strategic management. We don't see much of that, obviously. Not failure to have a business plan or a quality business plan. Lack of cash, certainly in the smaller organizations. Too much cash, I would say, in some of the big organizations makes them fat and lazy and relying on their laurels of a big fund, which we're now starting to see ebb away at quite a rate. Organizational structure. One of the biggest issues we're seeing with the big consultancies coming in is the OD, the organizational design, and how they bring these cookie cutter templates in that allow you to just overlay your team, call Bob the project manager or product owner on Monday, and everything's fixed without the backing that actually supports what that structure should look like, and therefore no operational model. There's an inability to change. We talked about that, the director for more of the same, please. They talk about change, but they don't really want to do it. Leadership is poor, we know this, and therefore the bad decisions are made. And when you put all of those things together, without that ability for, as we saw with the Prussians, without that corporal at the coalface to come up and help the executive get that information that they need and understanding. And what's kind of gone out the window is planning. So I think where we've sort of seen this get worse is back in the 80s and 90s, we did a lot of strategic, detailed planning, and then Agile came along. We don't have to do planning anymore. We just go straight to execution. We test and learn on the fly. And that's great if you're 3 dudes in a garage with a few quid. If you're doing that with multi-million and billion-dollar projects, that doesn't tend to work so well. And then they start to fail very quickly. And if you think about the why, the what, and the how, the sort of vision, mission, the strategy, then the execution, we tend to jump straight into execution. We solutionize very quickly. We'll cover why we do that shortly. And then we go into that plan with a solution driven by some good idea at the top. And then 3 months on, the wheels start to come off and we wonder why. And we believe that if you start at that point, you've got a 20% success rate. If you do the why and the what properly, if you understand the vision, the purpose, the mission, the strategy, and you can do all that in 2 or 3 days, believe me, this isn't months of planning, then you've got an 80% success rate. And hopefully we'll talk more about that and understand why that is. Because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And also it's no good having a plan that you planned that you then give to someone to execute. Going back to the corporals and the Prussians, right? And I had this in the military so many times. The generals come in with a plan. Hey guys, go and execute the plan. Okay, that's great. When I then disappear downrange and execute that plan and it starts to go wrong, what do? I've not been involved in the planning, so I don't know what the pivots were. I don't know what plan A, plan B, plan C's were. I've only got the plan. And it's almost like, the delivery plan for a project. Here's the milestone, hit that, But what if I don't hit that? What if I need to change? Well, you have to ask me, get my permission, come back a step. That doesn't work. And the great thing about McChrystal, he was managing 20,000 soldiers in Iraq. And he did a daily scrum stand-up, literally 5 to 15,000 people on a call for 90 minutes every day to give everyone the situational awareness. And he said, when you're on the ground, the planning that we've all been involved in may change, I get that. When you're on the ground and something happens, you have the authority to act and react as if you were me. So question yourself and say, if McChrystal was stood next to me now, what would he do or say? All right, and hopefully you know that because I'm giving you my intent and my belief and my ideas. So when you do that, crack on. And when you come back and tell me what's happened, I won't take you to court. I won't hold you responsible. I will say, well done. You took initiative to do what's needed. And how much of that do we see now in organizations? Cascaded. They all want autonomy of agile. They all want that accountability at the coalface, but they don't give that relinquished command. They don't allow the control to move down from the top to the levels where it needs to be. And how would you do that? Well, it's no good planning if you don't have a strategy. And again, Rudy Giuliani, ahead of his time here with those masks, but this was obviously 9/11, major issues with toxins in the air from the collapsed buildings. But again, a man who very quickly stood up, led from the front, got a strategy in place to rebuild, the cities and the damage that was done there. And as he said there, hope is not a strategy. You can't sit there, and we're seeing this now with organizations. Some of the sort of outcomes of what's happened since COVID is companies have either gone into mental overreaction, total knee-jerk, week one of lockdown, fire everybody, close this down, do this, do that, got themselves blacklisted as a sort of unethical company, or they've just stuck their head in the sand. They're going to what I call ostrich mode. Oh, I hope it'll be all right. Yeah, it'll be back to normal soon. And we do a case study in one of our courses using British Leyland. It's actually Jaguar Land Rover. They published in February that we'll be getting back to opening our factories on the 1st of April. So within like a 6-week time frame. So that's a lack of understanding of what the problem is you're facing, and therefore hoping that things are going to get better. They're not going to get better. Anybody who thinks that this thing is going to lift pretty soon is naive, and therefore you have to plan accordingly. The business continuity plans all got pulled off the shelf in March. Again, talking to organizations, 60% of the ones we spoke to, they got to their Annex B pandemic response plan, opened the pages, and it said TBC, not done. Those that had them tried to execute and they failed because they wrote the business continuity plan and didn't test it in peacetime. Now, why does a military do so well? Train as you fight. In peacetime, prepare for war. So if you've got a continuity plan in your workplace, pull it off the shelf and run it through the reality of things failing. Because if you don't, when it does come to failure time and you pull it off expecting that to be your Bible that's going to make everything better, then you'll open those pages and it will let you down badly because you've not put it through the stress tests you need to do. Don't live on hope. Make sure you've had plans and involve those who are going to execute in the planning is the key message here. And here's a bit more evidence to back up what I'm saying. It's not just me ranting and raving about the state of the world, right? Why do we need red teaming nowadays? You can probably look at all those nice little pictures there and icons, and there's a standard theme. All of these companies have gone out of business, but they weren't put out by competition. They weren't put out by a nasty, horrible event going on around them. They shot themselves in the head. These are all self-inflicted wounds, and the majority of companies, 85% of companies that go out of business, it's through self-inflicted wounds because they always fail to look inwards, to look at the problems they were facing, and to be critical of themselves and why. And it's this over-optimism, there's a lot of biases going on, we'll cover, that allow them to get to these positions. And again, when we talk about this more, we can spend hours talking about each one of these companies in turn and why, but there's a standard theme throughout all of them, and it's that sort of ignorance of what's going on. And especially now with VUCA accelerating failure. Before, the customers were lagging the client, so they could get their product out in time. The customer go, great, it's a lovely product. The customers are now driving that. They're demanding what they want. Technology has allowed that pace of change and design. And the way people are, purchasing is changing. So all these companies are now lagging and trying their best to catch up. And through doing that, they're making some bad decisions. A couple of examples here. There's no chance that the iPhone is going to get any significant market share, said Steve Ballmer of Microsoft. Now, I'm not sure how many of you still got Microsoft smartphones, but I'm pretty sure that the answer is 0 on the call today. So again, this is this Goes back to leadership. It's almost this arrogance and this hubris of, you know, the same with Nokia. How's Nokia? Gone. And there's so many examples of this behavior. Another great one here. Neither Redbox nor Netflix are even on the radar screen in terms of competition, from Jim Keyes. Now, Reed Hastings at the time, who was the founder of Netflix, he flew down to see Jim and the board, and he walked in and said, "Hey guys, I'm Reed Hastings, and I've got this thing called Netflix. It's online streaming. It's the future. You know, I know what you guys are doing. Your late fees are too high. Nobody wants to go to the store anymore. It's going to be online soon. Love Film are delivering DVDs, so that's going to put you out of business before even I do. But hey, I've got this thing. It's freaking awesome. Online streaming. It's the future, and I've seen it now. You can buy it for 50 million." And they laughed him out of the office. So Reed went away, and he went back a year later with more evidence, and now people are subscribing, and he's got a database of evidence that this is going to work. And they laughed him out of the office again. 4 years later, when Blockbusters went into administration, Netflix was worth 23 billion on the market. 4 years. So again, goes back to this. Why did they think this, right? And it's not that Jim Keyes is stupid or the board members of his team are stupid. It's that they were of that era where these biases and these cognitive overloads that they've been facing led them to believe something very different. And we've seen the same with Polaroid, with Kodak, so many of them. So you bring that mindset into the VUCA environment we're facing today, and you've got a big problem. You've almost got a powder keg of behaviors that we know isn't good. Now that those individuals are facing volatility, things are changing all the time. We're not really sure what's going on. My old school plans don't work. Uncertainty. How many executives don't like uncertainty, right? You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in this day and age. And if you're not, then you're going to struggle. You're going to react badly. You're going to revert back to type. You're going to be far more restrictive in your behaviors. Complexity. That's the whole point of agile and agility, is to enable these complex adaptive systems that we are now clearly sat in, often chaotic, to be dealt with. And if we're not dealing with them properly, if we're trying to apply old school ways of working, then again, the complexity will overcome us. And ambiguity. Again, people don't like to, "Oh, I'm not too sure about that. What's the answer? What's the solution?" Well, we don't know. We're going to test and learn. We're going to find out. But I need an answer now. It's not going to happen. Well, give me one. So people lie. People make false stories up to give them something they want to hear. But then again, you're applying psychological pressure. And then when things go wrong, someone starts getting held account to it, rather than being open, honest, and transparent, and crowdsourcing your capabilities rather than that biases and groupthink. And again, as I said, I've been banging on for VUCA for years. Only now are people starting to listen. I gave a brief on this a couple of weeks ago, and they were like, "Yeah, we now see VUCA's real." Well, sadly, it shouldn't have to take a horrendous virus that kills millions of people. But if they didn't believe it before, at least, again, the opportunity of all this, people now might start to wake up and start realizing that old school ways aren't going to be working going forward. And this is everywhere now. This is the upside of COVID. It's affected everything. You know, it's not just the market stall holder, it's the macro economy, global economy. And again, everybody's gone, "Oh my God, this is tragic. My glass is half empty. My business is going to close." The smart businesses we're talking to are the ones who are seeing this as an opportunity. They are seeing the potential chinks in Napoleon's armor. They're seeing how they can thrive with their business and jump on the bandwagon in certain areas rather than go off a cliff, because there's always opportunity when there's a crisis. Einstein and both Winston Churchill said that. And this is why you've got to get your team engaged. One thing a person cannot do, no matter how rigorous his analysis or heroic his imagination, is to draw up a list of things that would never occur to them. So this is what's great. We did a course the other night, and we were just doing about stakeholders, and we had 13 people on the course. We said, "Right, draw up your list of stakeholders for this problem." And between them, they came up with 42 different stakeholders. And then we did a whip round average, and they said the average would have been like 15 if you'd have done it on your own, or 2 or 3 of you. So the wisdom of the crowd is so powerful. So why? And it's so easy to access with technology nowadays. I can go out and send, you know, a survey out to 1 million people tomorrow and get that data. But why don't we do that as often as we could and often as we should? Because they don't want to be seen to be not the superhero. As we saw those first slides, the superhero doesn't exist anymore. Anybody who thinks they can do this on their own is a fool, not a hero. You have to use the power of your people to help identify these unknown unknowns, which Donald Rumsfeld coined as a phrase not long ago in a post-Iraq. And it's even more understanding why we need to do this when you get into the psychology. So Dr. Daniel Kahneman, he wrote Thinking Fast and Slow. If you read that book, point of interest there, that is one of the most bought business books on Amazon and one of the highest unread. So on the Kindles, 1,000 people have bought it, only 5 actually read it. And I understand why. It's an awful book. It's a great book, but it's awful. It's very slow, very draggy, but it's great. Really interesting. Bryce spoke to Daniel Kahneman when he was writing the book on red teaming. And the sort of Adam Strong philosophy of 300 years of that we as humans react to data and we are very structured is absolute nonsense. It's been proven now that our brain is just haywire. It jumps to conclusions. We hear one thing, we see this on social media. Somebody sees one thing and they're off, right, that's it. And then something the next day comes in, right, I'm changing, and people are pivoting and randomly bouncing around like a pinball machine. And that's just how the human brain works. And the more we accept that, the better you are then able to counter it in a calm, structured manner rather than going haywire with some of the decisions we make. Add to that these things, biases and heuristics. And this is just a short list. We could triple this list. And we go through and teach and talk about these on some of our courses. And we're all, I talked about the ostrich effect, negativity. We're all under the influence of some of these biases at certain points. When you read into them all, you go, oh yeah, I remember that. And it's not that they have to go. It's like anything. It's that you have to be understood, and then how do you counter them? So if you're going to brief an executive and you know that they are facing, or you're going to be facing into 7 of these different biases because of the characters they are, then you know how to pitch and how to address. It's that understanding of the fellow human being and how you need to adjust and react and be that chameleon reacting to that. And also if you can get them to recognize these biases that are impacting their behaviors, then you're in a much stronger position to deliver. And that's why when we did the stakeholder mapping yesterday, once we had those 42 stakeholders and we picked out the top 5 who could really cause problems for us, we then went into, right, pick those 5 individuals. What biases does Bob, the CEO, have that you all know from his day-to-day behavior? Susan, our CFO, what about her? And then you start to unpick their ways of thinking, and then that allows you to readjust your plan that's going to give it a far more favorable chance to get accepted or go through rather than shut down at the first opportunity. Obviously, here's a big one that we're all aware of, organizational dysfunction. All the big organizations I've been in have this. The military had it. It gets sort of beaten out of you over time quite well. Groupthink, everybody thinking alike because that's just the way we do it here. The sort of cubicle robotic behaviors of how many times have I gone in to try to change something? Yeah, but we've always done it this way. Why do we want to change it? Well, how's it working out for you? Yeah, but he thinks it works as well. Well, it's not, is it? Satisficing, what's that? That is coming up with the first, quickest solution possible. Okay, which when you're under the cost to deliver something, or there's a timeline or a milestone, how often have we done that? Yeah, it's good enough, let's go. We'll test and learn on the fly, and then it all fails, rather than just taking a little bit more time. Or don't satisfice, have somebody challenge it. It's saying yes when deep down you want to say no, but you're joining part of the groupthink, and they all start to align. Abelian paradox is exactly that. It's this is wrong. It's that kid at school. You want to fit in. You don't want to be the black sheep, right? You want to be part of the bigger family. Therefore, you will just say whatever the herd's saying, so you go along with them rather than putting your hand up and being called out, which is often a very uncomfortable position to be in. And certainly where you've got the politics of some of these organizations where to do that, as I alluded to earlier, you lose your bonus. Some of these things are family, life-changing decisions you're going to make by opening your voice. I've done this in the past. In my previous careers, I've been patted on the back. I've been given awards by, Downing Street. I've been fired twice. I've been promoted 3 times. You just never know. But, you've got to understand the politics of what's going on and make that call. And if it's the right thing to do, if you've got integrity, you've got to make it the right way. And if you've got a toolkit like we're going to talk about today, it hopefully gives you that sort of next level to move up the ladder. And obviously careerism. We see so many people becoming yes men. I did this years ago. I did a tour with the Royal Marines. One light blue Air Force guy, 50 Royal Marines in a room. Colonel's at the front briefing something that was utter nonsense. And I just said to the guy next to me, I said, hey, are you going to stand up and tell him? I think it's your position. He's like, hey, I'm not saying a word. Well, why not? I guess, what? he writes my report. So I had to stand up as the sole light blue in the Air Force and go, hey, Colonel, that's incorrect. Why? Here's why, and here's what's, oh, great, thank you, thanks for that. And afterwards he said, oh, I wish I'd done that now. Well, it's too late, but you've got to understand people's mindset and politics of all this, and it's rife with many organisations.
Marcus, just while you have to be
Yeah,
there,
sure.
that might be a good moment just to give you a chance just to catch your breath. I've had quite a lot of good questions coming through. I'm going to keep some of them for the end, and I know you're going to go into your toolkit, but I've got one here that might be relevant to your previous slide and just maybe give you something to think about when you're presenting the toolkit, etc. But we've got one here which is a really good one around the key to red team thinking is credibility. And the Prussians use their best soldiers. The challenge is getting people that the incumbent leadership will react to. And is it sometimes best to consider going external?
Yeah, great question. Great question. That's what we found. So we'll talk about evolution of red teaming to red team thinking. But when you had a red team, and this is where we had clients, so they have their own red team in the company, but then we were brought in to sort of facilitate and coordinate with them. So we came in as that non-biased external support. So it's not, hey, bring the consultants in for 6 months. It's a couple of guys or a small team coming in for a week. And therefore you have that non-biased individual who can almost call out the red team as well, educate them in the tooling, because what we also found, and this was at a big Fortune 50 company, big telecom company in the States, they had a £5 billion project. And one of the C-suite had said to the red team, I want you to can this project. Use your red team to bin this project. Right? So again, going back to careerism, internal politics, the poor red team leader's like, ouch, that's not my job, but I'm under pressure from this highly level C-suite to do that. So by having us come in to do that, we can make sure that it doesn't drift down that path. You use the facts. And then what actually happened was, they put this through 3 5-day periods and ultimately went to the board and it got signed off. And the guy who wanted it binned was a complete convert, because he wanted it binned because he didn't have the confidence in the team to deliver this as it was expected. But once it had gone through the mill and questions had been answered and all those assumptions and the sort of Prussian behavior had been executed, he had that far more relaxed approach to it. Therefore, he released the reins, which is what you're trying to do. What you wanted to do is get that command and control that sits at the top. Command's fine. Command can stay where it is. You need command in any organization, but push the control down. And the longer that stays here or here, the worse you're going to have your culture forming. If you can push that down, and that team who then did this was so happy and confident and rewarded after that, hey, this really works. And the fact the big boss flipped from being, using me as a tool for his own agenda to now backing me up. Why they're red teaming ran into problems was every single paper that came to the board, it went to the red team. So their day job became this much inverted with the red team. So their inbox was all red team stuff. So having a permanent red team is something not many organizations have. Having somebody do this as a side desk job is really difficult because it gets very popular, and we'll cover more of how you adjust to that. Okay. Great question though. Thank you.
Got another quick one if you...
Yeah, fire away.
Just give you a break in your content delivery. So the drop in business agility, maturity sounds similar to the drop seen in software delivery performance when organizations focus on speed, lead time, deployment frequency. They don't give quality enough focus.
Yep.
So your mean time to respond, your change in failures, so DevOps metrics.
Accelerate stuff. Yep.
Is there a similar observation being made for the business agility maturity?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's that quality. And I think probably what it was I think the figures probably are wrong. I don't think it's gone backwards. I think those initial figures were fabricated to a level. It's like when you do something new, it's that bias, isn't it? We're doing something new, therefore it's all great, therefore we're going to report that it's great. And we've seen the reporting, very few companies are automated on reality, therefore any reporting that's done via a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint, I can go, click, select, green, good to go, right? And that's just how it's happened. So that reporting that all's great tends to follow when you get something new. I love this. My new car's fantastic, it's beautiful, I polish it every week. 6 months later, you don't want to drive it, you never wash it, it's a mess, you're bored of it, it squeaks, it rattles. So I think potentially those figures haven't dropped, they were just never great as they were. And we've seen that in the software. I think as the metrics are now coming out, we are getting more data-driven reality metrics that are holistic. You know, it all used to be about going faster. Well, going faster is great, but also your quality is going down, your risks going up, and your morale's going down. Shouldn't we measure all four of them as an holistic indicator of the value we're driving? And then when you have that dawning moment with an executive that the faster you keep going, the worse it will be, slowing down to speed up is the key, then you start to get some good conversation, but you have to have that data. Almost you have to fail, sadly, before you can actually get the evidence to say, look, we need to stop now. And I think that's the dawning moment. They're realizing now that some have failed. Use the experience of others failing so you don't have to. How's that? Any more questions?
We're good just now. I'll carry on. I'll go back to some.
Yeah, sure.
Again. But no, those seemed very relevant, pertinent while you were delivering some content. There was a bit of correlation there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So general pattern, again, many great quotes. He was a chap who said that planning is everything, plans are nothing. So again, he wasn't dismissing that plans are pointless, but unless you've been engaged in the planning, it's the planning that's important. Understanding what goes into a plan. I can throw the plan out the window because as long as I've done the planning, I know what's going to happen. And also about groupthink. And this is so true in some of the militaries organizations I've worked in. If everybody's thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking. And that's one of the things I found leaving the military is in the military, most people are alike. You've got an alignment, you've got a way of thinking, and therefore getting people to think out the box is quite difficult. Whereas you come to outside organizations, you've got a huge diverse group of people. I mean, look at everyone here today. So hopefully with that diversity, you get different types of thinking. So again, the military brought red teaming in to exactly do that. There's a General Schumacher, special forces throughout his whole life, came back into the proper army, the big army, he called it, as a general, and was shocked at the robot-like behavior of the military. So he invented red teaming for the army to be something that was dispersed at all levels to start people thinking differently and challenging, which is what special forces do. Red team thinking isn't something that, the people who know what they're doing do. They just do it by default. The Amazon board are red teamers through and through, to the core. Right? The Apple crew, these people who do this by default, it's just how they operate, it's how their mind works, but it can be taught. And that's what this was brought into the army for, to do, to bring that challenge in. Hence why, you can challenge, a corporal can challenge a colonel in the army, general in the army, and it's now welcome. So all of this is to go towards making better decisions faster, which is what all of our executives and individuals want. And we believe, having done this for several years now, that decision-making is a practice. It's not a process. And what do I mean by that? Let me just give a few examples. Decision-making is sometimes a quarterly away day for a bunch of execs to go sit in a nice hotel, drink champagne, talk about stuff with a guest speaker, and then make a decision. That's how decisions are made in some organizations. Others have a process, a checkbox exercise that they go through to allow a decision to be made. And what we're saying is that's all right, but it's not ideal, is it? In the VUCA world, you can't have those laggard behaviors helping you make decisions. You have to be doing this on the fly. So it needs to be a practice that you are doing by default, by rote, on a day-to-day basis. And if you've got all these different tools and techniques and you're aware of your biases and your team's character, then you're allowing all these things to move around, but you bring them together. And McChrystal talked about being in Iraq. He said it was like the machine. The army is a machine. The army as a machine is easy, it's fixed, you know what goes where. And it works to a limit. But when it starts to get pressure from others working differently, it collapses. Whereas if you use the human mind, it's super complex, it's moving, it's fused. But once you get it honed with other human minds, the outcome is 50 times more than what it could be on its own, because you have that enhanced capability. And it goes back to a great Chinese quote from a wise old man that said, none of us is smarter than all of us. And if you can fuse those brains to work together in alignment, then that's a working practice. You've got that working capability that allows decisions to be made at the right level as well. So what do we mean by that? Current business cycle today. We have a problem. We study it. We do an understand phase. We do a discovery. It's normally either ridiculously lengthy and full of tick boxes, or it's super quick and it ends up being like the exec says you need to build this, so go and build it. And you've got to start on Monday. We then satisfy, so we come up with the instant solution. We go in a room together, we throw some post-its, but we go, right, the quickest solution is that, let's go and build it. And then what we do with that, we sell it to the board. We go back to the design council or whatever, and we put the paper in and we give them all the buzzwords they want to hear. We give them all the truthful timelines we're going to hit. They're sold because my bonus is on this, and then we go into execution. That can take 6 months, it can take 6 days, it doesn't matter. Because invariably what happens is it then starts to go off the cliff. And then they brought Agile in to help all of this over time, and it's actually made it worse, as we've seen, because it's not really looking at what the problems are that you're actually facing into. So with red teaming, what we're trying to do now is bring in different tools and techniques that allow you to understand what it is you're trying to achieve, how you're going to achieve it, and what the likely outcomes are going to be. And we have 3 different ways of doing this. First one is using analytical techniques. So data-driven, black and white facts, getting to grips with the numbers, the figures, what's going on, asking the hard questions. And we've got a tool called 6 Strategic Questions, but it comes initially from Delta Force, US Special Forces. And their 3 questions were, if we succeed, what do we look like, we as a team? If we succeed, what does the enemy look like? If we succeed, what does the environment look like? Yeah, and then we've converted that into, if we succeed, what does the competitor look like? And then obviously, what does the marketplace look like? And then prior to that, we've added, what is the problem we are trying to solve? And I went into a very big bank in January for a 2-day workshop. They gave me OKRs, objectives and key results for the 12-month period ahead. It's like a telephone directory. I read them all the day before quickly. And I asked the first question the next day. 8 executives sat in front of me. Right, everybody, what's the problem you're trying to solve? That all these OKRs you think are going to deliver against. And I got 8 different responses. And then we derailed the rest of that whole day to come back to square one of what is a physical problem. Because they realized that if they'd have cascaded that work out, they'd have confused over 100,000 people across the globe. Because everybody didn't know what the problem they were trying to fix. And if you don't know what the problem you're trying to fix is, everything beyond that is a waste of time. And then we go into what's called the assumptions challenge. So all the assumptions you've made and how much assumption is put on many of the plans we're looking at today. A lot. Assumption is something you believe to be a fact. Most assumptions are something you wish was true when we see this in reality. So we validate all of those. So what you're getting now is security, confidence, and an ability to really challenge yourself and move forward. Then we go into the cool, fun stuff, imaginative techniques. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. You get your smart people in the organization who think out the box. We do something called a pre-mortem. So everything has gone to the absolute worst possible state it could have done. We have failed catastrophically. Let's do a pre-mortem. Let's imagine that's happened rather than a post-mortem. That's never good. That's already happened. We did a course a couple of weeks ago. So the founder of pre-mortem, a chap called Dr. Gary Klein, he created this method good 15, 20 years ago. He joined us and we run a class with him now teaching this tool, fantastic tool, used in all sorts of different organizations and different sectors. But it allows you to then work backwards. If everything's failed, how did it fail? And you go back the 10, 15 steps. And then what you're having then is a roadmap that as you go down your track, if one of these things start to pop up, you've got a warning and an indicator that you can do something, plan B, plan C. We then do stakeholder charting that we finished the last 2 days of. This was where you take all of those clear understandings of the stakeholders. We look at 4 ways of seeing. So I'm company X and I'm looking at merging with company Y. How do I see company Y? How do they see me? How do I see myself? How do they see themselves? So you start to get into the psyche of people's perceptions of each other and others. And by doing that, you can start to better organize your plan and your structure to target what you need to do to get the right decisions. Then again, alternative futures analysis. Great one to do now. Your business today, and I asked this before the client recently, where are you going to be in 2021? Oh, well, I don't know. It's COVID. It's really crazy. Oh. Okay, stop crying. Let's do this properly. Let's think, all right? What could the alternative futures look like? And let's map them all. I don't have a crystal ball, but I can have a damn good go at the 4 opportunities that are lying ahead and where you're likely to be given what your actions are. And therefore your actions can drive which of these paths you go down. All really simple when you do these things. Seriously, these things take a day to do, and everybody who's done them, once they've done it, they go like, oh my God, this is so simple. So you don't need to come back in and do this for 3 months with a consultant rate of 6 million a day. No, well, that's it. 2 days, I'm gone. See you. You can do this yourself. Call me when you need a bit of an update. Devil's Troika. This is the sort of advanced state of devil's advocate. So think back to the days of the Pope. And what we do here is we take a plan, we give it to another team, and their job is to make that plan better. And then we give it to a third team, and their job is to destroy it, blow it apart, rip it apart. And then you give it back to the first team. So they get this plan given back to them with loads of blue labels going, this can make it better, a load of red labels to say this is what it'll fail on, and therefore they can make that plan much better than they first thought it to be. And if you do that before you submit a plan for sign-off or for validation, it's going to be much stronger. Weighted anonymous feedback, one of the tools we use along many of the liberating structures, allows anonymity and crowdsourcing. So again, stakeholders yesterday, right, pick the top 5 stakeholders out of 42. How do you do that? I'm not sure. If you use dot voting in a room, you're still going to get biases of people watching who's voted for what, the crowds, groupthink. So we use online, we use Mural, we use lots of different capabilities either in the classroom or out to allow people to have a voice, but to be anonymous. And then we can talk about it afterwards. You don't have to hide it from everybody. And a great story, we did this with one of the major changes within the US military. A general was leading it and they had about 25 people in a room. They all had to put 3 big things they think they need to focus on to change. Days worth, post-its everywhere, and they picked them all off eventually through voting and feedback, and they picked 3. And the general's going, great, I'm going to take this to the Pentagon now. It's going to get briefed to Obama next week. But I've just got to know, right? I've got to know who put these things up. Come and put your names on them all. And the little lieutenant, 25 years old, stood up, walked forward with his pen, and he starts to write on one. And he starts to write on the second one. And the general's like, whoa, Sonny. He's like, what? Anyone else standing up? Goes, no. What? So you're telling me all these 3 are yours? And the general lieutenant's like, yes, sir, but it's my handwriting. And he's like, wow. And he turned to Bryce and he said, I'll tell you all now. He goes, if you'd have come in here today and if we'd have just had all of us do it by normal ways and writing it down, and this little kid comes up to me and says, hey, sir, we're going to do these 3 things, I'd have gone, yeah, thanks, Sonny. I'd have screwed it up, thrown it in the bin and ignored him and looked to my senior officers. He said, but this process has just proven to me that the best ideas don't have to come from those who you think have the most experience. And this is so relevant now, but I've loved working with some millennials and Gen Zs these last few years, and the difference in thought, the diversity. I've got 2 girls, 14 and 17, and most of the stuff I do, I run through them first, because there's just a difference in the ways of looking at things. They come up with some cracking ideas that I would never have thought of that really enhance what we're trying to deliver. And you're going to start seeing that in the workplace now. You've got a generation, 3, 4, 5 generations working together now and making people realize that harmony can exist by exposing the capabilities. I think is a really powerful way. And then finally, the red team are the enemy within. As I said, self-inflicted wounds. One of the first things we do is, hey, we need to buy an AI thing, or we need to bring in this consultancy. We need to do that and this. You don't need to do anything. Let's look internal first, because I bet you 60% of your problems I can fix by identifying where they're causing internal issues. It's your own bureaucracy. It's your own red tape. And again, we did this at a big telco. We had 10 in the room. We said, right, list down all of the things that cause you pain on a daily basis. 158 responses, right? And then we just map them all on the board. Okay, before you even start thinking about something cool and funky to buy, just fix these problems, and that will increase your pace massively. So how does this then impact how we do that end-to-end delivery differently? So in the understand phase, we apply analytical techniques, ask the hard questions, validate the assumptions. We then move into explore. We start to think out the box. We look at alternative futures. We look at failing. We look at succeeding. Talking to the startups of the week, succeeding, getting a massive number of customers coming in that you weren't able to deal with can cause you to fail. So how do you look at a pro-mortem, we call it? There's a pre-mortem, but also a pro-mortem. Everything's gone so well, we still fail. People don't often think of that, but there's a lot of good stories out there that back that up as happening. Then you validate it, run it through the mill, challenge it, get everybody to look at it, get everyone to tear it apart, put it back together again. It's good enough. It's good to go, and it's gone through all those hard questions before execution. And then you decide. So now when you're briefing the board, you're giving them that confidence. Going back to that CEO who wanted to bin this plan using red teaming, if you give them all this information, they're far more confident that they can make an executive decision. They can make that decision that is better than it used to be, and it's faster than it could be. Then once you've done that, you execute. And we don't stop there then, right? This doesn't get executed because we're in a VUCA environment. Everything's changing, which is why this is cyclical. We have to iterate. And all you're doing now is taking all those tools from red teaming and applying them at different stages constantly. And what we like about red teaming is when we do this with a client, we'll take their problem and go, yeah, we think you're going to use these tools, but that may all change. It's like golf. I know I'm going to step up to the tee and I'm going to use a driver. After that, given my golf, I have no idea what I'm going to use, right? No idea. Likewise, if you want me to come and fix something in your house, I'll bring my toolbox. I know I'm going to use a hammer to smash through the wall first, but when I get through the wall, I don't know what tools I'm going to use until I get there. And that's okay. That goes back to that not having to know. It's just knowing I have something to fix it. If a guy comes to my house to fix a problem, I don't need to know what he's going to do, what he's going to do it with. I just need to know he's capable of fixing the problem wherever it is. And that's the confidence we need to give our executives, that using these tools and capabilities, we are capable. You just have to trust us. So if you've got red team, what does it allow you to do? Counter those unconscious biases that I spoke about, leverage the wisdom of the group, challenge your assumptions, stress test your strategies, identify unseen threats, but more importantly, uncover missed opportunities. Most success can come through finding these opportunities that you would overlook normally. What's the alternative perspectives out there? Identify diverse opinions and options and ensure the best idea wins, not the idea of the executive, not the idea of the man who's hoping to get his bonus by being the biggest voice in the room. And ultimately, make better decisions for your business faster. But it's hard, as I mentioned earlier. Outside facilitators are needed, or a dedicated team. Gets expensive, extensive training required. Can be time consuming, 2 to 3 to 4 weeks sometimes, and political challenges. As I alluded to earlier, people can start to use this as an almost a executive audit, which isn't good. And it can slow down decision making, because if you don't do this in a focused, disciplined manner, it can quite easily go off the rails and become far more of a burden. So what we did, we came up with red team thinking. So this isn't everybody, being a red teamer. It's everyone having these tools, which can be very quickly learned and used to use wherever they need them. So the executive can use it, the guy in the scrum team can use it, the middle management can use them, the cleaner can use it if they want to. No separate team required. Informally or even individually can be used. And it's really easy to learn. I'm kidding you not. When we do our we do a 1-day course, we break it over 3 hours, 2 evenings. And people are using it on the next day before they come to the course the second day. So they learn the 6 strategic questions. Next day, they come back and go, I did this at work today. It's really easy. I'm like, yeah, we know. They don't believe it's so easy, because it's something like, it must be a trick. But it is so simple. And what one of the feedback was all of these things you teach us, we already do all these, but we do them individually on our own too fast. What we never do is come together as a group and bring those tools together and just take the time, and we're talking a day, half a day, to actually do it properly. We tick a box, we go through fast, we satisfy, we group think, and we jump through the hoop because that's what's expected. It works at every level. Anyone can do this. You don't need buy-in. Even if the C-suite aren't up for this, you can do it incognito. Do it quietly, and then they'll start to see the benefit. And then you can say, oh, we were doing this red team thing. Okay, what's that about? Here's the data. Here's our progress. It's fast to use and highly adaptable, as we said, the golf course tool bag scenario. And this is the bottom line. We have to make better decisions faster, right? Not any decision faster, because we can all do that. But what about quality, risk, morale? And we need to disrupt ourselves. Those organizations, Facebook, come together every year and they go, right, who's going to do to us what we did to Silicon Valley 10 years ago? And they do that all the time. Amazon do it. Because somebody out there, as we said, while the enemy is within, while I'm in one big building teaching somebody red teaming, somebody somewhere else is doing the same. The enemy gets a vote is a line we use. The enemy gets a vote. So if you're doing this internally, be smart, someone else is going to do it as well. And they're thinking, how do they put you out of business? So if you do that yourself and get ahead of the game, that's how you become ultimately kingpin in the industry. So Bryce wrote the book, Red Teaming. He was a civilian. He wrote the book American Icon, having gone through the rise of Ford in 2000s with Alan Mulally as a CEO. He wrote the book about how Alan did that. Then he went to the Army's Fort Leavenworth Red Teaming School for 6 months, the only civilian to ever have got through. I don't know how he did that, but he blagged his way in. And then from that, he was rolling this out across business for the last 3 years. I've known Bryce about 2 years, and when I finished the big gig last year, we paired up in November. I went out to New York and we did a week together at this big telco. And just so I could get an idea of what he was doing. And we've paired up since and been rolling this out across the globe. We've been working in Australia, China, Vietnam, all online now. I should have been there physically next week, but thankfully we're grounded. So, but yeah, really powerful capability. Book's great. Those are ready. It's $3.99 on Amazon Kindle, or 15 quid for the book. So really good value. Well worth buying, an interesting read. Hopefully, as Sath will vouch for once he's finished. And what's the feedback? Obviously, Alan Mulally, if you don't know him, is a hugely famous. He was the CEO of Boeing during 9/11 and the CEO of Ford in the 2000s, and made them both the top profit companies of the decades. Extraordinarily helpful, force multiplier. Our strategy department need to learn this. That was from this big telco who tore apart the strategy department's plan because they weren't thinking. Invaluable. And the key here is essential tools for business leaders. That was from a recent CEO we had on one of the courses. And he's like, wow, this is something that we all need to be doing. And certainly the NEDs, the non-executive directors, are also looking at how they incorporate this sort of capability. So that is it. Quick and dirty. Shotgun effect. Thank you for your time, and more than open to have any discussions and questions now.
That's great, Marcus. Thank you. No, brilliant. Great stuff. Really inspiring, actually. Yeah.
Thank you.
I definitely need to get more of that book read, but I know Don's also been on your course, so he's
Don's been on. Hopefully,
he's been raving about it as well. So no, brilliant. No, thank you. I have had lots of amazing questions. Some of them you've answered as you continue to go through your content. I've got an entertaining one here at the end, but I'll ask it because I think it'd be interesting to hear your response. So, how does one get a job in Red Team? I'm unemployed at the moment, so no company to convert. Give us your thoughts on that.
This wasn't a planted question. Funny you should mention that. So,
nope.
Okay. As Bryce says, we like to eat our own dog food. I like to drink my own champagne. We are constantly evolving our business model. So we started out as red teaming. We've changed to red team thinking. And how we deliver this, we do three things. We do open enrollment training. So we've got numerous courses that you can all attend and come along to. We do corporate strategy training or support. So we will go in and train companies, or we go in as a one problem fix and spend a few days with a problem for a strategy. Or we do one-to-one executive coaching. So we'll do a 3-month red team coaching program. And we've had on our course a real mix of people. So like Don and stuff, we get people who use this in their workplace. So they come on our course and they go back and use this in their workplace, and that's fine. And then we've got other people who are consultants, coaches, who are going, this is really great. How can I use this, as a brand? So what we, at the moment, literally, it'll be out next week, is an accreditation. So what we're looking at is, how do we give somebody the accreditation that they can become a formal red team thinking coach or trainer or both? And having that ability to use our branding, use all the tools, use the networks we've got, use our online platforms, and then hopefully, obviously, once we move offline and go back to localized work and regional work, how can they then become, we're working with a team in Australia, we're working with a team in Vietnam who want to become the localized capability on the ground. So that's what we're looking at. More than happy to, my email's there, drop me a line. I'll be running through that. Well, I've got a session with the guys on Friday, but happy to follow that with anybody. And how's that further growing? 2 further things we're adding to that is our online platform and training capability. We are adding individuals who've got something to bring. So if there's a bolt-on to our offering that's useful, for example, Kinefin, OODA Loop, business case, all these types of different tools that are out there that align to what we're doing, then we would put those onto our platform. That individual can then be offered up to our students who come through and then want to expand their knowledge base using those things. So that's one addition. Our second addition is we're moving into verticals. So again, having run these courses, we had 6 investment bankers from Wall Street join us last week. And they finished and wrote to Australia and said, you need to do red teaming for investment banking. We then had the chief fire officer for Ontario call us and said, you need to do red teaming for fire service. So we've got a load of verticals here. If I can't, I won't spin my screen, but I've got a whiteboard here that's got all my business model on there. But we've got these verticals of, aviation, police, government. We got a call during the course last night. The chief of the Association for Police Officers in Georgia contacted us and said, we need you to come and help us do some stuff because we're struggling. So it's having these verticals. And then what we want to do from a sort of career perspective, back to the original question, is have individuals who are either passionate or want to pick up a vertical and run with it. So for example, we've got 2 guys who want to do the fire one. So here's a fire vertical. We put you in touch with the fire individuals in the organization. Then you're the red team conduit to enable using all the content, and we'll revise and update the content. As I said, we change our stuff often to reflect the requirements of the organization. So if people are interested, again, get in touch. I can send you the understanding of where we're at the moment. It's fast changing. And again, the beauty of this is the feedback we get from people is great, because it's the communities. And this is where Bryce, having been a journalist and did the military version, he's not worked in industry. So pairing up with me and our other instructors and coaches who've been in industry, got the understanding of what the customer wants. It's really powerful. So anybody who comes on our course, we welcome their feedback and input, and we change. Every time we do a course, we change something, given the feedback that people give us, because we have that open, honest, transparent way of working that we really value. You know, we make friends out of people as well as just cohort students, because it's that interaction. And I think this group of understanding that we all get the problems we're facing, and anything we can all do to help each other, whether it's NHS, whether it's a police force, whether it's CEO of some, you know, Fortune 10 company, it's all the same problems we're facing. It's just down to people, empathy, and how we can use simple tools that don't cost you millions to make a difference. So more than happy. Yeah, not a trick question at all. Please drop me a line.
No, it was good, and thanks for expanding on that. No, it was very clear to me throughout that, you know, I think having that open mind is obviously clear to effectively applying these practices. And you know, the group that join us, you know, every Wednesday is a lot of open-minded folk.
Absolutely, yeah. This is not for those people who like to be on a rail. You know, I can't leave out my comfort zone. You won't be happy. You know, this will make you very uncomfortable.
And applying new ideas. No, brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got an intriguing one for you here. So,
sure.
What properties or aspects of an army / military makes it a complex system and not complicated?
The human mind and the enemy. For me, that's what's the army. This for me is a great question, really great question, because I've said 25 years in the military, so I saw the military change from what it was to what it is. And VUCA came from the military. So when we were in the Cold War, when I first joined the military, 1990s, you know, it was a Cold War. The threat was the Warsaw Pact, and we had very linear, hierarchical ways of working. So for the context we faced, that was a complicated problem, right? The problem was the Russians are coming over the German plains with tanks, pull out the book. The war plan is move through Germany, launch the planes, simple, complicated. And then as VUCA evolved, as we moved from the Cold War collapsing into Afghanistan, Serbia, all these different wars and environments, all of those different environments themselves became very complex for the soldier on the ground. And therefore you had to change your mindset, and therefore the book didn't work anymore. And therefore using the human mind rather than the prescripted plan is what's caused the complexity to evolve into the military workspace, without a doubt. And now you look at the military's way of working, I think, and it's hilarious. And I tell people I'm in the military, oh, was that just all shouting and doing as you're told? The military are without doubt the leaders in devolved responsibility, empowered execution, you know, commander's intent, mission command, all of these words that are out there. The military do that day by day. Corporals have a say. Generals shut up and listen. You know, this is the way they work. So the C-suite of business has so much to learn from the evolved army. You look at McChrystal, you look at David Marquet, the submarine commander. If you see and watch those videos and understand what they've done in the books, that's how the military operates. And that's why it's so effective. And people enjoy it because people grow really quickly and are able to deal with complexity. The military deals with complexity in a blink. You know, that's what we were built and made to do. And also, when you are in peacetime, we're training to fight. So when you go into a combat zone, people don't blink because you were doing it last week. It's just on a different line and a different map. And the bullets coming in a real versus plastic. But your mindset hasn't changed. And it's doing that and understanding that. And if you don't train to that, then when you do go into it, and I've seen this before, you've gone into scenarios where people have physically crumbled in front of me. Literally, when they've realized it's a real threat, they have literally broken down and lost it. And you've had to put them aside and carry on doing something without them. And that's just in an ops room where there's no bullets coming in. That's, oh my God, there's a real threat aircraft coming in now. Yes, right, here's what we need to do. And they've lost it. Remove them off the console, take the headset off, get me someone else. This man's broken. And then afterwards, you talk to them and debrief on why it happened. And they're like, yeah, I never believed this had happened. And okay, well, this is the acceptance and mindset. So I think in business, if people train for that daily and accept it and use these tools and allow them to be, you know, how many executives get challenged on a daily basis? I'd say 1%, 2%, very few. If that becomes the norm, then that becomes default behavior. And therefore it just starts to flow and people deal with complexity. Complexity is not a dirty word. Complexity isn't scary. It's just different. You have to experiment. You have to probe. There's no off-the-shelf fix. And that's what people don't like. If they can't fix it with the manual, they get scared and worried. And therefore by having complexity, they create often chaos, which is the sort of the next quadrant round. So yeah, military, without a doubt, I can vouch for leading edge on that. And special forces are just the next level, how they operate. We can spend another hour talking about that if you want later.
No, that's great. Yeah, we've maybe got a few more minutes for questions, and I'll bring proceedings to a close. So I think you have talked about quite a lot of this sort of stuff, but it might be good just to close out with this one. So great examples of the red team thinking being applied. Obviously, you've talked a lot tonight about VUCA and exactly what we've gone through with the global pandemic. But examples in commercial use in 2020, any sort of real, anything that really stands out to you, I guess, would be my slight reframing of that question.
Of current?
Yeah, just the kind of stuff that's gone on over the last few months that you've been involved in the conversation.
Yeah,
where you really applied this stuff and it's made such a difference given the challenging climate we're in, I guess.
Yeah, so if you've seen online, but you know, we've been doing free offerings to sort of government, NHS, US Marine Corps, believe it or not, they contacted us. So we've been helping them out and a lot of the sort of public sector services. And the key thing, they've been very used to operating complicated. So they've been very manual driven. They've got a process, what to do. And where we've really helped them is to slow down and think and just helping them stop, showing them two tools. And Don knows this, just doing the 6 strategic questions and the assumptions challenge. And you can do that in you can do it in half a day if you access it. You can do it in a day, half a day at the most. Just letting somebody see the value of that and taking the time to stop. And that's the pressure that I think everybody's under nowadays is you have to be seen to be busy. Everybody's Mickey Flanagan, double busy. If you're not being double busy, what are you doing? You're loafing, you're not doing something. Rather than slowing down, taking the time to get your thoughts, get aligned, bringing in the other people and getting everybody's download to then work forward. And what's really working beneficial for us is with that is where, and Daniel Kahneman said this when Bryce was briefing him before he started doing red teaming, he said, Bryce, this is all great, but the only thing that's going to happen is it will still fail because you're going to walk out and they're going to go, yeah, we know Bryce said that, but we're going to go back and do it this way. And Bryce went, well, there's the beauty of red teaming. Goes, we don't do that. We don't give you any answers. We don't give you any ideas. What we do is create the environment where you can use the tools and techniques and your own brains to come up with a decision. So when that decision's made, it's not Marcus said we should do this. It's we all agreed, given all the facts and figures we're facing, that this is what we need to do. And I think that's what's been really useful in the last 3 months with people is those who've not knee-jerk reacted, that it's too late for most of them. Those who've not stuck their head in the sand, those who've just paused, and there's a great quote called Bad Leadership, you know, bad leaders react, good leaders plan, great leaders think. So it's, if you, and I keep saying this before, unless the bullet coming at you or a rocket coming inbound, you do not have to react. You know, you have time in business to at least take half an hour, and that's all some of these tools take. You can apply half an hour worth of thought with the right people and get a way better decision and some enlightenment than you would have. And that's where we worked with the NHS, slowing them down in their areas in a pharmacy trust. The fire service are loving this because they've just been reacting. You know, they are naturally reactive to a fire. But by thinking before they get, by pre-morteming the fire, they are now far more better placed to react to it accordingly in a far more structured and controlled manner. And likewise, hopefully this is why the police have called us as well, because they're just seeing that you're always on the back foot at the moment. And that's the thing with VUCA. If you don't understand it, you're on the back foot. And if you're sensing you're on the back foot, I think this is where this can really help, because it allows you to slow down and it's not a lot of time out. And I sort of use a joke where if you just do your mission and plan, for every 3 months you try and deliver, you will go 1 or 2 weeks off track. So after a year, you're going to be 2 months off track. That's a lot. Whereas if you take 1 or 2 days to plan this properly, you're always going to be within 1 or 2 days of traction. And if you do kick off, you can kick it back. And that's the beauty of people's exposure to this, is just them thinking for themselves and going, oh, right, I never thought of that. Because it is like, I go, what about this? And they go, oh, yeah, we never thought of that. Why not? Well, either I just didn't, as Schelling said, because it just never occurred to me. Or, do you know what? I've not had the time. I've not had a minute to breathe because I've been crunching data, sending out PowerPoint decks, making stuff up, rather than just going, do you know what? Get the team together, let's go out, bring someone else in to get a different opinion and talk about the problem. If you do that in a structured way with the tools and techniques we've got, it really, really helps.
No, brilliant. Lots and lots of great insight this evening. Yeah, we've got a few minutes left, so I'm
yeah, sure, fire away.
I think, to be honest, we'd keep you here all night asking you questions if we could, but we know you've got a life to get on with, and yeah, just want everybody else to
but by all means, engage afterwards. Not a problem.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I'm sure you'll get a lot of people reaching out to you. But no, just to say,
great.
Thanks again.
Oh, thank you, and thank you to everybody for coming along.
It's been thoroughly enjoyable. So no, thanks.
Good. Thanks, everybody.
And I'm hoping people will sign up for some of your courses, because I think they're
more than welcome.
Valuable.
Drop me a line.
In this current climate, there's a lot of people could be doing applying this type of practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks again. I'm sure we'll keep chatting.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Just quick items to close with, folks. So some of you might have just seen, I've literally just published another event just before I jumped on this evening. So in August, Dan Vacanti will be joining us, so I'm really excited about that. He'll be doing a session on all things Kanban and forecasting. He's obviously, as many of you know, one of the leaders in that space and that thinking. I spent 2 days in a room with him doing the PSK recently, so he's a hugely intelligent and insightful man. So do please join us for that if that's of interest to you. And next week, we're actually being joined by Martin Hinshelwood, who's also a good friend of Dan Vacanti's, and it was both of them that I was with. So, yeah, he'll be doing a session next week on the tyranny of Taylorism, which is a talk I've seen him do before, so that's another cracker. So he's been with us before. He'll be on next week. And then we've got a whole bunch of other stuff in the diary for you all over the course of July and well into August. We're kicking off July with another cracker with Tendai Vicky, who's just recently published his book, Pirates of the Navy, so that will be another cracker. He'll be talking about innovation and transformation. So yeah, he's another highly insightful chap. So yeah, hope you'll join us for that. And yeah, just keep checking what we've got going on Meetup. Our friends at Heart of Agile Scotland have also got a really good one coming up in early July. They're hosting Roman Pitchlar. He's going to be doing a great clinic on product ownership. So if you're in that space, that's definitely worth checking out. And yeah, just I hope you've had a great night. And yeah, you do have any feedback for us, just reach out to Donald and myself. You can get us all on the usual channels. And yeah, we'll just keep the conversation going, and we hope we'll see you again. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers, guys.